Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, July 22nd, 2026 Penfield Town Board Work Session. I will now call the meeting to order. Councilman Lang, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mary.
Here.
Dean. Here. Getz.
Here.
Lang.
Here.
Teglash. Here.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes from the June 24th, 2026 meeting?
I'll move.
Second.
Any discussion or corrections?
Vote. Barry.
Aye.
Dean. Aye. Getz.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Teglash. Aye. All aye.
We also have minutes from an executive session held March 18th. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second. Vote. Barry.
Aye.
Dean. Aye. Getz.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Teglash. Aye. All aye.
All right, it appears we have no guests this evening, so we will move into our department head updates. It looks like Sabrina Renner is here for recreation, so I will ask her to come up.
Evening.
Good evening.
Short report today. Lots going on, but just reporting that the summer concert series continues through August. Concerts start at 6:30. Our summer programming is going well. Many activities also continue through August. And we're preparing for the fall. Our fall program brochure is at the printer right now, and we expect that will be in mailboxes in a couple of weeks. It'll be online just a little bit before that. And the registration for residents starts August 24th, non-residents August 31st. Projects and updates. Shadow Pine Southside Trail Shared Use Trails Project, Costitch Engineering preparing the 50% engineering designs for the end of July. Color Penfield Green is continuing to do work on the eastern side of the south property, removing invasives and habitat enhancement efforts. And staff openings, just our year-round lifeguards and swim instructors that we're always recruiting. That's all I have.
Is there any questions or comments?
Quick question. Do you know anything about the lifeguard situation, or are you just reporting it for us? Because I've heard Andy say as well, we're always recruiting. So are you short-staffed, do you know, or?
I don't believe so at this time. I think it's just for coverage.
Yeah.
So that we have enough staff for coverage all the time.
Okay.
It's just a constant recruitment.
Yep, I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
With the weather cancellations for the concerts, are any of those getting rescheduled, or are those just done?
Not as far as I know. We generally don't reschedule those,
Okay.
sadly.
It's been a challenge, I know.
Yes. That's been a challenge for a lot of things this summer
Yeah.
with the smoke and the weather. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next I'll ask Bob Moore from the Department of Public Works to come up.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So the department activities we got, we've finished Plank Road paving job for the Monroe County DOT. We've been cleaning up the trees from the storms that we've had, these last windstorms. The Parks boys have been doing the Little League maintenance on their fields daily with all this rain that we've had. They've had to really work hard to keep them in shape for all that activities to be held. We held our interviews for the 3 senior MEO promotions that we have in the highway department last week. Patrick is out on vacation this week, so when he comes back on Monday, we'll sit down with him and make our decisions and fill accordingly. The LaFroyce has done the site work on the Phase 2. They've got the trusses there for the pole barn. They've marked out where that's going to be, the salt barn and the sand barn, so they can start doing the footers for them buildings. Hopefully next week, I believe, is when they're going to start that type of work. And facilities guys are working on the artwork up here at the town hall to get that hung up. That's been quite the project for them guys to get going. The old fuel tanks were removed down there. We did come across some contaminated soil. It's been sent out for testing. As soon as we get the results back, we can find out where it has to go. We're pretty confident that it's going to go to Seneca Meadows, so we don't have to haul away to Buffalo, which will be nice. It won't be quite so bad. We're prepping for Scribner Road for the cold in place recycle. It was supposed to happen tomorrow, but with all the rain, that has got pushed till Monday. So we'll be starting that on Monday. The sewer boys have put the 2 new motors in extension 19. The VFDs showed up. They've got one of those in. They're waiting for it to get programmed, and then we can program the other 2. And then that station will have all new motors, all new VFDs. So
Can you explain what a BFD is?
the VFD is what powers the motors, and it transfers which motor is running so it can cycle them through so they all have the same run time on them. So it's not one motor working harder than the other 2. It balances out so everything works on that. We had to kind of retrofit because the station's old enough and they didn't have the exact fit in there. So it's taken a few more minutes to get that all squared around. Plus, none of the wiring was marked of where it was. So they're getting all that, so everything's going to be labeled and set so that anybody going in there, whether it's our electrician or an outside one, can read it and understand what's going on. So, and that being our major one that takes 50% of the town's sewage, that one needs to be up and running. Let's see here. Parks Boys have been doing the pavers at the VMP, Veterans Memorial Park shelter down here, and then they're gonna, once they get that done, we're gonna work on the ones on the entrance coming in here, and then fixing that heated sidewalk for the wintertime. The facilities boys, they updated the bathroom in the Little League. They had a pipe burst down there, and it flooded the Little League bathroom, and they had to jackhammer out the floor and the wall and fix all the plumbing, and they did it looks fantastic. They did a really nice job on that. Staff openings, we now have 3 highway laborers that we're looking for. We got interviews starting Friday and into next week for that. And we have 1 full-time facilities night laborers position that we're looking for on that. So if you know anybody that's looking for a job, have us come see us. As far as the budget stuff goes, we're working on a few options. Knowing that the budget and the way things are, if we have to make cuts, that we've got some options of that we might be able to look at to not necessarily replace equipment, but maybe fix it in a fashion, see how it works. We got to see how things play out. That's all I got.
Any questions or comments for Bob?
Bob, real quick, I know there was some concerns about the Gloria Drive brush drop-off location. First, how is that going? And second, is there anything that you think we can do as a board to help?
We actually have that as an item on the
It's on
agenda.
the action item
Yeah.
coming up. So,
Figured I'd still get a,
it's filling up fast.
Okay.
Not only just from the wind damage, but from contractors coming in, and that we'll go in depth more on that at that point. Normally, we would get through the whole summer before we had to grind, so we wouldn't have to shut the service down. Right now, it looks like probably in the next 3 or 4 weeks, we're gonna have to shut it down for a week to grind. So,
I know we'll talk more about it.
yeah,
Since you're reporting.
yeah, so.
Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Okay, next, we will go to personnel with Amaret Miller.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. How are you? Supervisor, councilpersons, legal, staff. My name is Amaret Miller, Director of HR. Sometimes the wind gets sucked out of my sails, but we are hiring. We have a comptroller position on Indeed and several websites. We are hiring a new comptroller, a director of finance, that particular role. We are sending 2 clerks to board for your approval in early August at your meeting. So that person is a part-timer who will work in DPW, and then the other is replacing a clerk who is going to move toward the clerk's office, so due to a retirement. And we have, as Bob said, 3 laborer positions that we're interviewing for this week and next week. And we have posted a 1 nighttime facilities laborer position, and we'll be interviewing shortly as well. On August 5th, we have our workplace violence training, prevention training by Comp Alliance. It's going to happen at the DPW building, and the focus will be on that grouping. We'll do it there so that the employees of DPW can easily attend. And then on August 13th, we'll have our fire extinguisher training delivered by Penfield Fire District, and that's at 10 a.m. CSCA negotiations have begun, and we had our ground rules meeting this week. There's, of course, a media blackout, so there won't be reports at these meetings about how they're going, but this is an internal discussion, and of course, leadership will be involved. That means you and supervisor. And then we also have a CMTV clerk position that we'll be hiring for, and also more of a technical IT type position that will be helping down there as well. I think that's it.
How about the school traffic guards too? Are we?
Yes, we interviewed 2 today.
Oh, good.
And they're very excited. They live very close to the locations where they'll be working. They don't know that we're excited about them yet, so I guess I might cover. But they did very well. But yes, we're interviewing for that, and we'll have folks out there with stop signs in September.
Great.
Right. Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next, we will go to Alan Wrights with Building, Zoning, and Fire Marshal.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Since my last update in June, we have received 153 new permits, done 378 new inspections, and have received 65 code enforcement cases. So rather busy month this month, especially with vacations during the holiday. So we've tackled everything that we can and have done a really good job. So props to everybody in my office for doing that. So the fire marshals have done 24 fire safety inspections and have responded to 4 calls requested by the fire districts. Unfortunately, including the one this morning at Bauman Farms, a very tragic thing for not only the farmers, but also for, for the town itself. I know it's kind of a staple here, and people, we're sad to see that happen to them. But good job by the fire departments, and also thank you to the DPW. Bob Moore's guys came out to help demolish some of the structure that was unsafe, to make it safe for people to kind of walk around the area. So, and of course, I will talk about GovWell real quick. It's going well. We have, out of the 153 new permits that we received, we've had actually put 102 in of those, which is a pretty good percentage. I'm hoping pretty soon it will be 100% that we're putting into that system. So some updates on the projects, just really one to think about is as you can see, Chick-fil-A's framing is going up. They're going pretty quickly. So soon as that's done, they'll start getting into some masonry work on the outside, and some other parts of the project will continue. Staff openings, as you heard from Amoret, we had a staff opening, but we did find somebody, so hopefully that will be approved by you guys. Appreciate that. And I think she's a good fit for our department, and I just also wanted to thank Kathy Anderson, who had been with the department for 8 years. Her dedication to the department is, exceptional, and I'm sure she'll do a great job for the clerks as well. So, and then one last thing, speaking of budget, usually I say everything's on track. I do have to mention that one area, which is a very small area of my budget, is not on track, which is the property maintenance for abandoned properties. We are over budget on that, and just wanted to bring that to your attention. I have brought that to the finance department to just let them know that the next voucher that will be approved will essentially put that over budget. So
those then ultimately get put
back on the taxes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And the county does reimburse for that?
Yes.
Okay. Can I ask another question about something?
Sure.
When is the traffic light expected to be operational for the Chick-fil-A?
That's pretty, it's up, but it's not operational yet. I'm not
I think they were going to start that a few weeks before they open.
Okay.
So I know they've been waiting a little bit. We've had a couple of calls.
It's nice having it there.
It is nice there. I guess that we can talk to the DOT and see if they're ready. I've seen their signs there now that say new traffic light, is coming to alert people to it. I know we've had at least one concern at night. It looks like a dark light, and people weren't sure if it was off from a power outage, so some people were stopping, so that's a concern we've passed along to the state. So once we get more clarity on that, happy to share with the board.
When it first goes up, I think everybody's paying attention to it, and then they get used to it being there and not working. And so my concern is that all of a sudden it's going to be on one day.
And I think they're going to put it on a flash, so it'll be like yellow, red flash.
Okay,
So that's why I
like
say,
a yellow flash?
yep, so it'll be up and flashing a few weeks before they start, so people can kind of get used to it
Oh, okay.
being there, and then, it'll go into operation.
Okay, good.
Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you. And Alan had mentioned that Kathy Anderson is going to the town clerk's office. She is going to the town clerk's office because Sue Scheidt is leaving us after 10 and a half years. So I want to take a moment to thank you for your service to the town.
Thank you.
All right, planning and engineering with Mark Valentine.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. So the sidewalk project is quickly wrapping up. They're actually working on a few of the last little pieces we've got on Jackson Road. So the Plank Road piece, they've completed all that we have. They're doing the topsoil and seed to finalize that. And then on Jackson, there's the Nature Conservancy property. They're finally wrapping that piece up and working on that now. And then there was one gap portion. We're waiting for a utility pole and a guy wire to be moved. Thanks to our friends at the county, they expedited that permit that RG&E submitted. So they have the permit, and they said it looks like next week they've got to replace 3 poles in that area to accommodate moving the guy wire, which gets it out of the sidewalk. So hopefully the poles get moved, and then we can continue that piece of the sidewalk there. So, and then we'll have one carryover piece. Next to Schutz, we've got to do a culvert extension. So we've got to bid that out this fall to do that. That got delayed in the county approvals, still in the project, but we'll have to do a culvert extension based on current product. It'll probably be late fall, winter before that culvert goes in. So that piece may carry over to next year to do that sidewalk piece, but that piece will be completed. So right now it's a temporary short-term gap, but we're still under budget. We're still doing well with the budget on that project. So, and that is a 50% match with the county. So we've already made our first submission to the county. I believe we've gotten our check back in payment for that. So we'll make our next submission once we're completed, but that's been going well.
Nice.
The Climate Action Plan continues to move forward. We've collected, I believe, all of our greenhouse gas inventory stuff internally. Sarah Waterman's been working closely with DPW to get all the data out of the gas boy machine over there before it disappeared. We'll have a new one and hopefully a better system after that, as well as all the RG&E bills for the town, compiling all that. So now the consultant's crunching all those numbers, getting that stuff compiled together for us. The active transportation plan, we'll be just talking about that later on the agenda, but that'll be some discussion, and then hopefully, the board accepting that as a final document. Penfield Forward, we've got, I think, much to discuss tonight on that. And then, as everybody experienced, we've had some significant heavy rainfall events recently. As DPW has been dealing with some of the branches in wood, we've been getting some drainage complaints, concerns around the community, but overall, I think, the streams and creeks have been performing well. I think being proactive on our streams has really helped. We've had some minor, issues, incidences here, but to my knowledge, not any major issues, concerns. So I think, the streams are holding up well, and then, DPW, getting out and flushing, cleaning storm sewers, catch basins, again, being proactive with that has helped. So we've been getting some quite intense rains that, are taxing the system. But I think overall, things are holding up well. That's all I had for today.
Great. Any questions or comments for Mark? All right, thank you. And then we will move on to developmental services with Carrie Ivers.
Thank you. I first wanted to share that Councilperson Bill Lang introduced a local law to amend definitions contained in Section 250-2.2. These were the definitions related to restaurants, bar, tavern that had been discussed at previous work session meetings. I'm going to come with show and tell. They are available on the town's website under projects of community interest. So if anyone is interested in seeing that local law or the draft local law, it is available for everyone's review. And the public hearing for that will be held at the August legislative meeting. For Alpheus Clark House and Lodge, a few remaining punch list items are being finalized. We're hopeful to be able to open reservations in the coming weeks. As we head toward the finish line, I'm very happy to report that the project was delivered, and we mentioned this before, but it was delivered ahead of schedule, and the 5 prime contracts came in under budget to the tune of just over $175,000. So, and with a project like the Alpheus Clark House, with a renovation of a building that dates back to 1832, that is nothing short of a miracle. So kudos to Krista Construction, to Collier's Engineering Design, all 5 of our contractors, especially Loyal 9, who is the general contractor. Their sort of teamwork and efforts to stay on track really benefited the town. LaSalle's Landing bathroom work continues. Work on the roof should be starting, if it's not this week, would be starting next. We do know that the timbers that are part of the roof structure are currently being fabricated. Decisions of, staining is happening and all that fun stuff at off-site, and will be coming to the location in short order. There's a slight issue needing with the pole that was installed needs to be relocated. Working on that, but so far that project's going along very well as well. We've had a recent ribbon cutting at Smoothie King. More ribbon cuttings are on the way, continuing to reach out to new businesses that are coming in, some that have required board approval, some that are just don't need a board approval, but if they get their sign permit, Kathy Anderson flags them and sends them my way. So we do our best to reach out and offer the ribbon cutting. And that's all for me for now.
And you said Clark under budget, 175,000?
Yes, yes.
I think was worth repeating.
Yes, yeah,
That's excellent.
yeah.
Carrie, I want to thank you for your leadership on that project. Yeah, you were very strategic and
Much of a team effort. I'm not going to, I appreciate that. I'll say thank you and take the compliment, but that is by far a very big team effort. Mike O'Connor from engineering, Shannon Schuman from building and zoning, the three of us were the three musketeers, and then invited everyone from facilities, parks, at many stages in the process for input, guidance, fact-checking, and so definitely, I would say Jay Robinson, Trevor Bailey, Tim Masterton, really, truly, Bob Moore, truly a team effort. So thank you, but it definitely took a village.
thank you. All right, so that concludes the department head updates, and as always, staff, you can feel free to leave if you want to, or if you want to stay for the rest of the excitement of the evening, you're welcome to do that as well. All right, so next we will move on to action items. The first one being a resolution authorizing the supervisor to sign a janitorial services contract for the Clark House. Madam Clerk.
Oh, I'm sorry. This isn't part of my usual. Authorizing the supervisor to sign an agreement for janitorial services for the Clark House.
With regards to Resolution 26T-132, I move as written.
I second this.
And the vote, Barry?
Aye.
Dean?
Aye.
Getz?
Aye.
Lang?
Aye.
Teglash?
Aye.
All aye.
All right. The next topic is a special use permit for 2021 Empire Boulevard, and that will be with Carrie Ivers.
Yes, this is a follow-up discussion. The public hearing had been held for the special use permit at this location. The lower level of the property was proposed to be another brewery, so same use as previously approved at the location. The reason it was coming to the town board for essentially a revised special use permit in this district is the upstairs office component was different than what had been previously approved in previous special use permits. However, the applicant reached out today indicating that they had realized a previous memo that they had submitted, they didn't upload it into the application, and so we did not have it in our possession. It was dated July 7th. They have decided, I think based on they had asked that they did not want to think about the future office use at this time. They had originally presented that to the board sort of in full transparency, but don't have a clear plan on what exactly that's going to look like. So I think they wanted to wait to come back to the town board to consider that at a future date if they decide to move in that direction. So I wanted to share that update with you now, that actually happened this afternoon. Erica MacArthur, I did put into the folder a memo. She sent the email saying, I'm so sorry, I just realized I didn't send this memo into the GovWell program, and attached it, and then it is in GovWell now. So happy to share that with the board on the screen so that you all can have the benefit of seeing it. Yeah. So, and she was saying that the conditional use permit, and this memo in it is in the file now, and I do apologize. It came in late in the day, so I didn't want to confuse things. It is in the folder. What I will say prior to that is there was also communication for the application. DOT letter was received. That was shared in the folder as well. And so I think at this point, defer. I also did upload the waterfront consistency review memo to the town as well. The use continues to be consistent with the LWRP, and that's something we're obligated to look at in this area. And so I would defer to the town attorney in terms of what needs to happen now.
Right. So generally speaking, a special use permit, or in this case, what we call conditionally permitted uses is synonymous with, what is known as special use permits. They generally run with the land. So that means that once a use is approved, then that use is approved, and it runs with the land. And it doesn't matter who the operator is. Our code has some provisions in some districts that say, among other things, if there is a new operator, then you should come back in for a new conditional use permit. LaSalle's Landing does not have that language. So it's my opinion that so the reason why it would have had to come in for review was because the use was changing, expanding, if you will, because of the upstairs. They didn't really have that fleshed out enough, really, probably to give that a full vetting. So the fact that they're withdrawing that part of their application means that the town board no longer needs to weigh in on this application, because it's the use, like in a zoning context, you regulate the use, not the operator. And so the use is a brewery, the use was a brewery, so that means that it converts it, in essence, under the Waterfront, or the...
Chapter 232.
Yeah, it converts it to a minor action, because it means it's a ministerial action. They just need a building permit. So therefore, the waterfront consistency is also not required.
Right.
So there's effectively no longer an application before the town board at this point, so.
Right.
But we did, you should know, though, that all the other stuff was vetted as if it was going to be before the board. We looked at parking today, and all that is in compliance. The DOT weighed in, but, at the end of the day, that no longer matters, because the use is still the same use that was already approved.
It doesn't matter now, but would the information that's been gathered in preparation for this new usage, with the upstairs, would the information that's been gathered apply if they should, down the road, want to use that?
Yes, so what would happen is if they decide, you know what, I've got concrete plans, I have a potential tenant or some other use that's going to happen, they would come to the planning and engineering and say, look, does this require a revised conditional use permit? And depending on what they were proposing to do, they might have to come back, in which case we'd ask them to submit everything, anew, depending on what the current plans are. So, you'd have to do a new waterfront consistency statement and go through all the steps. But as far as this application goes, there's no longer really anything that requires town board review.
Okay, thank you.
Just from a precedent standpoint, a good example would be when Capitano's restaurant came in a couple of years ago. It had previously been Brody's on the Bay, and prior to that had been Murphy's Law. When we reviewed the incoming application for Capitano's, then code enforcement official Andy Savegas and he reviewed it, and he said, I'm looking at the code, and there's no provision that requires them to come to the town board. So we communicated that to the applicant. They proceeded to get their sign permit through the building and zoning department, and off they went. It's only time there's a change in the occupancy. So when Alpheus had to come in, that's because it had been something other than an entertainment space. So anytime there's a change in how the property is being utilized.
Okay.
Right. Now, there's provisions in other parts of the code that do require it for a change of operator, and, we leave that fight for another day.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, a special use permit, it's just concerning the use, and the use is the same, so. And that's a good example, the Brody's on the Bay.
Yeah.
Right. Is there anything else on that?
I was all prepared to talk about all the different elements and everything, so I can put that aside.
All right, so next I will invite Bob Moore to come back up so that we can discuss the Gloria Drive brush drop-off.
Hello again.
Hello. So do you want to begin by kind of describing the situation?
Yeah, so what we've got going on now at the Gloria Drive we've opened it back up for, about a year ago there, for the contractors that are working for our residents to dump there. The problem that we're running into is that's opened the floodgate. Now, most of these contractors realize that, hey, I can dump there, all I gotta do is tell them I'm working for a resident in Penfield, give a bogus address, and go. We've caught some of these doing that, and we start questioning, so we tried to come up with a slip that the homeowners have to provide to the contractors. Well, that's not working either. We've had some contractors that live in town, and they say, well, I live here, so I can dump here. And it's kind of hard to dispute that. And I said, well, it is if it's on your property, but if you are contracting it out, that no longer falls underneath that. And, you know, we've got a single person out there that's manning that facility, and it puts them in a very bad spot. And like I said, it's quadrupled the amount of brush that we've gotten in there, to the point now we're gonna have to chip. And I said, we're gonna have to shut it down for, I'm gonna say probably a week to chip it, and we're gonna have to haul a lot of that out of there because there's gonna be no room. And now, you know, we're creating an issue that now we're not gonna be able to have that service for the residents for probably a week to maybe 2, depending on how long it's gonna take to get it all out of there. So I'm asking to see if you guys are going to entertain the idea of shutting it back down to contractors for a while here, and just leave it open for the residents.
So how does that work? If a resident needs a contractor to bring all that brush over there, what happens?
Well, there's a few that have that, but not as many as the contractors that we're getting in there. So that's the issue, that's what we're struggling with, is how we're going to do this.
And when you hire a contractor, usually they take on that responsibility.
Yes.
They don't rely on the
Yeah,
town.
it's not saving the town taxpayer any money having them drop it there. They're charging the same amount for the cleanup and all that. They're pocketing that money that they don't have to dispose of. So it's putting our guys and gals out there in a situation that I'm really not comfortable with.
I understand that, but I'm not comfortable either cutting off residents from a service that we provide that.
But I don't, it would still be open to residents bringing
Yes.
their brush. What we're saying is no contract.
Right, now-
Like if they demo a kitchen or something, is that what you mean? Or is it only
it's only
brush?
Brush only.
Brush only. So, yeah, because I recall there was a whole process I had to go through when we utilized that service about 10 years ago. We had the contractor loaded up his truck. He said, you got to come with me. And I did. I followed him in my car, and I had to sign before he could. And I don't understand why that's, I don't understand what's happening on the location.
So what they're doing is they're pulling in out there, and they know that there's only one person. See, before we had it at the DPW.
Right.
So we had more people around, they had more of a support backing and all that. Now they're out there, that's them. And what they're running into is the guy will, contractors will come in and they'll bring the resident on the first go-around, and then once they're done, they realize all I gotta do is,
Oh, I see.
and they say, well, this is,
Oh.
And it's hard for the person out there to try to verify that, because there's times, not all the times, but they start backing up out there, and then people are getting upset that, why does it take so long to get in here? Well, we're dealing with a contractor we're finding out is not working for anybody in Penfield.
So then if a resident wants to bring their own brush, there's no issue?
No issue. They come in
Okay.
there, they show them, and a lot of times, most of the residents know that go out there. They come in with their license already out, they just show them, off you go, no problem.
All right, so that would still be available?
That's still available,
Oh,
yeah.
I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just the contractor end of it is where we're having the issue.
Yeah, I understand. I
You know,
appreciate that
and
clarification.
like I said, whether, it makes it a little more difficult on the homeowner, you know, to come in and get the slip, you know, but once we give them the slip, they see it, they take a picture of it on their phone or whatever, and, you know, they can duplicate stuff quick and easy nowadays.
Well,
you
what
know.
about dated slips? Like, you know, valid only on a specific day that they're actually bringing it in?
We may have to look at some like that, but like I said, we don't have anything in place right now that elaborate. You know, it's
Yeah.
basically, you know, have the homeowner show up with you, you know, or if the homeowner says, I can't do that, well, okay, then you gotta come in, we'll give you a slip, hand it to them, and go that route. It's not a,
No, the 3 times I've had different companies come and clean up the yard or cut branches and then, you know, into smaller pieces. And that was part of the cost. They never, I hopefully never took it to the town of Penfield. That was what they were responsible for. So I believe to get this under control for our residents, I would agree with you that we need to just stop these contractors from coming in so that we can give this service back to our residents who are paying for it.
right.
Until we can find a new process, find a
Yeah.
better way, move
Right.
it back to DPW where we have more support.
Right, something of that nature, but,
And obviously, I was concerned enough to bring it up even during director's. I agree with Linda, and I agree with you. And I think, to Catherine's point, I would suggest we're doing a service to our community by saying, okay, there are some people taking advantage of this. We need to step back, make sure that the town people can still do what they need to do. Because now this is going to cost the town more money. It's going to
Right.
cost more money to take a whole week. And it inconveniences people that are doing it on their own and
Yeah.
trying to do it the right way.
yeah, and not to mention the amount of fuel it's gonna cost to chip it, and now fuel is gonna cost to load the chips out of there, and that, yeah, and we're gonna have, you know, probably 5 people out there for 2 weeks probably doing this, so. Which we wouldn't have to do until after we closed it down at the wintertime,
Right.
so.
Now, I recall when we established the rules for the brush dump, if I recall correctly, all it would take is a vote by the board to change the rules to implement this.
Yeah, if it was done by resolution, then you can do a motion. It'll be reflected in the minutes to change the rules in accordance with what the DPW director just said here today, to make it limited to residents but not contractors.
And would we
And a
have to
second
wait?
and a vote. No, you don't have to wait.
Okay.
You can pass that resolution tonight. It can
Okay.
be reflected in the minutes.
Okay, but before we do that, I would still like to see if we can create a process that protects the residents. You know, something. Maybe, first of all, you have to solve the problem, and I understand, you know, in order to kind of clear the
Right.
energy so you can figure out how to move forward.
Right.
But I would like to take that second step down the road with that. I would like to manage this tonight and then see if we can figure out something.
And one thing to keep in mind is this will probably be alleviated when we are able to leave Gloria Drive, and you know, the plan is to put it back at DPW,
see.
and that would probably alleviate most of the problem in
Right,
the future.
because you'd have the personnel
Yeah.
there, yeah. And then, do you have is there a timeline on that estimated?
They're talking Phase 2 completion mid-November, so
So this year?
it'll be,
Ish.
maybe.
Yeah.
Like I said, they don't know if they're going to be able to finish all the blacktop work this fall.
Mm-hmm.
That may, you know, fall over into the spring, so I'm going to say, you know, we'll look at it in the springtime and before we open up for the season and evaluate it at that point.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Is there any other discussion or questions on that? Does anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion as verbalized by the town attorney.
I'll second.
All right.
It's verbalized by.
So let's just make sure we clarify
Yeah,
for, so
let's
that
have
we've
it on
got
the
it
record.
down, that it'll be to change the rules to allow for individual residents to drop off their brush and to suspend contractor drop-off.
Okay.
Okay?
With immediate effect.
Yes, effective immediately.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Okay.
And do we need to post anything? Would that help by posting the updates on the website?
Yeah, we'll get with them tomorrow.
I would even recommend, even if it's some sort of poster there, just to help the employee who's there,
Yes.
because they are in
Yes.
the worst spot.
Yes.
And then they can throw us
The messenger.
where they should be. Hey, this is the board. That's our job.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Okay, ready to vote?
Yes.
Barry?
Aye.
Dean?
Aye.
Getz?
Aye.
Lang?
Aye.
Teglash?
Aye.
All aye.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is Canandaigua National Bank sign review with Carrie Ivers.
Thank you. This application is coming to the town board because Canandaigua National submitted a sign permit to the Building and Zoning Department to replace their building-mounted signage with their updated logo. So Canandaigua National Bank has done a complete rebrand across the board. The signage needs to reflect that. The reason it's before the board is because they're proposing one additional sign it's not a complete replacement. So they're looking at doing one new building sign on the exterior of the building. So I'm going to show you some existing photos of the building first, in theory.
And it's on the east side of the building. Was that the
Yes.
new one?
So this is the side where a new sign is being proposed. And I'll pull up the sign packet in a moment. The photos were not cooperating. It's just taking it a moment to think on the computer. So the reason it's before the board is because of the new signage. And so I wanted to bring that to the board's attention, have determined whether or not there's any issues or concerns. You have full discretion in this district. There are no set requirements in terms of limitations on number of signs, and so it really is fully your discretion. Forgive me, I'm trying to pull up the sign packet, and it is not going well, and I'm so sorry. How come both documents are the same? Well, this is fun. Oh,
You
there-
did send it to us, though.
Yes. Actually, I can pull it up in my email. That's a great idea, because in the folder, it's not working so great right now.
Okay.
Bear with me for a moment.
I was able to get it to load.
Oh, were you?
Yeah.
All right, well, I wish your computer was connected to this television. I'm so sorry.
It's just the one elevation that you're looking at to discuss.
Yeah, so bear with me for a moment. I'll try that again.
Well, they're going to put it between the two
Right under
banks
the
of
window,
windows,
between
right?
the windows.
Right.
Yeah.
Between the first and second floor.
Yeah.
And I'll point out, for the benefit of the board and for the public at home, this location does not have any freestanding signage. So if people are traveling,
Yeah.
especially southbound on 5 Mile, there's no way to know what that building really is as you're driving by it. So I think that's the purpose of the signage that's being proposed.
And the one thing I was trying to figure out, it looks like there will also be lights with the signage on the east side between the first and second floor. I
That was the
couldn't really-
picture.
Yeah, it looks like that the sign itself is not lit, like backlit, but there are 3 overhanging lights to
That's-
light the
okay,
sign.
Those are lights, that's what it,
It's what it appears to be.
right.
Yeah.
I think it's similar to what's on the front of the building, too.
Right,
Right.
right.
It appears we have a representative here. All right, you can come forward.
I'm Jeff with Canandaigua National Bank. Can I jump in?
Of course you
Absolutely.
can.
Have a seat.
Apologies, Jeff.
No problem. So just to be clear, Jeff Ashline with Canandaigua National Bank. We're not looking to add a sign. We're looking to relocate the sign that's on the second floor that gets hidden by the tree this time of year when it's in bloom. to the lower portion above the 3 windows on the bottom that you see right there. We want to bring those goosenecks from up here and bring them down here so that there is visibility of that sign during the summer season. You know, you can see the sign coming down 5 Mile in the winter when the trees got no leaves on it, but this time of year, it's gone. And so, as you mentioned, when you're coming westbound on 441, you can very rarely see that sign up in the upper right corner. So we're just looking to, there you go, we're just looking
That's
to
where it
relocate
is?
the lights and the new logo to that location, but not add a sign.
Forgive me, I apologize, I've driven by that bank a million times, and I've never seen the existing sign.
I know.
So I do apologize. I'm providing testimony without meaning to.
And will there be lights?
Yeah, we're going to actually use the goosenecks. So there's
Okay.
goosenecks on 441,
Right.
Which is on the previous
Yep.
page, I think. The same goosenecks are, you can see them there,
Yep.
are up in the upper right corner that nobody can see. We're just going to
Right.
move those down.
And when will those be on? What hours will those lights be on?
Usually, so I think they're on a photo cell. So in the winter, 4
Dusk
o'clock
to
to,
dawn.
I don't know, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning.
Okay,
But
so
they're
they
shining
are
back
20.
on the building, not out into the public.
Okay. And I don't know, in a
Oh,
public
wow,
area,
yeah,
there's no
They are,
homes there.
geez, I never noticed
Even
that.
if it is lit up, I think the lights would not
I
necessarily.
said it's
be.
across the street from the art shop, so
Right.
it's not an issue.
And they're going to be focused on the logo.
Yeah, on the sign.
And even a little bit of light is not necessarily a bad thing right there.
And to keep
Right.
people from hanging out under there.
Yes. And there is some overhead light off of the Mark's Pizzeria on that side as well, like over patio
It's on all
lighting,
night
To the
long.
north, yeah.
Yeah, they have goosenecks as well.
All right. And there's streetlights.
the streetlights as well.
Okay.
So forgive me for mischaracterizing your
No.
application. I've never even.
No, I figured I was here.
Thank you.
It appears that the directional wayfinding signage is all going to change also. That's
Yeah, that's.
anecdotally, that's a good thing because the signs are awfully small now.
Yeah, I thought so too.
In reality, the logo is smaller on the front of the building than what exists now.
I just realized that's a C in the logo. I was wondering, what's the arrow? But I see, you look at
It's
it.
3 o'clock
Yes.
somewhere.
Yeah.
I know. I thought that's what-
Banker's
I thought it was
hours.
o'clock, yeah.
Ouch.
Used to be.
Right.
Yeah. And I think the signs are the same size on both sides of the building.
Yeah, I
It's
appreciate
about
that.
6 square feet smaller than what's allowed, I believe, for the 2 square feet per linear foot of frontage.
So yes, in this district, there's really that same, the signage stand design is very flexible. The town board has full discretion. So that's the standard for other zoning districts. This is a specialty district.
I appreciate those directional signs too, at the drive-through, the ATM level.
It's a little funky back there, as you all know, I'm sure.
Yeah.
People tend to drive a little crazy back there.
Yeah, I was going to say, an overabundance of transparency, I'm a customer. So
Yes.
Love it, but it does get a little, the parking is wonky.
Yeah, and the signs get faded over time, so if a fresh look and new paint, new vinyl would kind of,
So what action is being sought?
So because there's a change in location, again, those are the things, if it's exact replacement, it doesn't come to the town board, it just gets reviewed, just referred back to the building department administratively. So you could just authorize the sign packet as presented, and then it can proceed on to the building department for sign permit issuance. Similar to how we just handled the previous decision
Do it
for
by
the
vote?
update.
Yep.
I'll make a motion to approve the sign packet as applied.
I second.
Barry,
Aye.
Dean,
Aye.
Getz,
Aye.
Lang,
Aye.
Teglash,
Aye.
all aye.
Thank you for the
Right.
clarification.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
You too.
Okay, the next action item is the completion of the active transportation plan, and that will be with Mark and Carrie.
So we held the public hearing. I don't believe we've received any.
A public hearing. Public comment?
Public comment, public input session. I don't believe we received any additional comments. We waited a few weeks to see if there's any additional input to that. So the town board has the final document of that. So just wanted to see if there's any no further discussion by the board of that. If not, we can proceed with a resolution to accept the document or receive the document.
I have to be transparent and say, with traveling, I did a quick through, so I apologize for that, but there are a couple things that jumped out at me. On page 14, and this might just be a typo, there's something about priority intersections, and it says to be drafted. But yet, it does talk about some of the intersections, so I don't know.
I think maybe that might just be a
Right, I just want to make
carryover
sure that there wasn't
fill in.
something more coming.
Yeah, they did some sample ones across the town that could be implemented at other
exactly.
locations, so I think.
What we were planning on doing with the town staff is taking a final read-through to make sure, catch any of those little
Okay.
mistakes and have the final plan, because what's been provided to us now is,
Still draft.
still was the draft.
Right.
We didn't, we wanted to wait until there was any more final comments before we asked them to deliver the complete plan.
And I noticed everything, there weren't really final costs for project, everything was per linear foot, per fixture. Will any of that go into it, or it'll just be, for us to look and prioritize, we'll have to do more?
Yeah, at this, I apologize, at this stage, for this type of a plan, generally speaking, you're providing sort of order of magnitude or planning level cost estimates. It's not until you get into either a feasibility study or you do a next analysis that's on a very specific location that you would get into those types of details, yeah.
Okay.
And obviously, as we've seen, 4 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years is a game changer in the cost.
Escalation costs.
Yeah, so it'd be really difficult to put a number to something.
That's a fair point, very fair. And this I'm going to state this, but understanding that because I did not do a deep dive, I've got a lot more to read. You can just simply say, keep reading, Linda. But they talk about the worst conditions on roads that we don't control, right? We don't really control 250, 441, 404, 286, 5 Mile. And it has language in there that says, oh, we can do this, but I didn't get this, I didn't get the sense that, and here's what we can do, here's the leverage we can post. Now, again, didn't do a deep dive, so it might be in there, and you can tell me, keep reading. But
I mean, it's always difficult dealing with agencies that are above us or not us. I mean, obviously, we have this document, so it was shared with them. So we had a meeting, especially with the county DOT and the state DOT, so they understood what's in the document. They appreciated, and thanked us for, being part of that. So I don't think any of the elements we put in there are unheard of or not able to be done.
No,
Obviously, for them, it's at a cost and, for their implementation, but I think at least having a document that we can look to and point to, saying, hey, here's some implementation items. I think we've got a better working relationship with both of those groups than we ever have. We met with them and, influenced, some of the design on Browncroft, incorporating bike lanes and some, additional sidewalks and other things. Again, not our project, but, I think we've worked collaboratively with those groups and can reference this document and say, hey, can some of these elements be incorporated or some of these things be?
Yeah, and I think adding to that as well, this document then provides, as these agencies are revisiting their own policies or practices or standards, as more and more towns are doing these kinds of active transportation plans, does it provide, sort of a basis or an impetus to revisit their own policies or approaches to how they do things? And so it serves as an advocacy tool, certainly, and, as new projects are coming through, this is something we can point back to. This is also something that for example, there are some future, federal grant programs.
Safety money or other stuff comes up, and there's a reference to it that says these elements could help with that. I mean, the 5 Mile Atlantic intersection was changed through safety money, so, brought that up as it had some safety issues. It was higher than the crash average across the state, so then there was money, available for that, so that could help leverage.
Right, and then
funding.
we could partner with either the county DOT or the state DOT to pursue federal funds for high priority projects. And then you have this plan as a sort of another documentation of the why and the basis for it, yeah.
Yeah, was there any studies that looked at these, and it's a good reference for it?
I'm not sure if you made it to this part of the study, but page 111 and 112 talk about interagency coordination and how we best leverage our relationships to.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
There's some
It's a really nice
interesting-
notice, and I didn't mean to interrupt, though.
No, it's
You're right.
okay.
That was what I was going to say.
There's some interesting caveats in
Okay.
there of things we can do to, kind of further the study.
Other comments, questions? Okay, so what are you looking for now?
So, I mean, we can, as staff, look at, we'll do one last pass-through on our end, go through, make sure typographical things are done and everything else. I think the meat and potatoes is in there, just to make sure that's good, and then, we can, share it back with the board, but, we're looking at some point to do a resolution to accept the document, within the town.
Document the completion of the project.
Yep,
Right,
it's
right.
complete, and then we can make it available, the final document on the website for
Okay.
the public.
Okay, so then we'll wait for the final review.
Yeah,
and then
we
go
just wanted to
from there.
review it with the board tonight, see if there's anything else the board had before we do that final pass-through, and make sure we incorporate all of that.
If the grammatical updates that are needed get taken care of, would there be support for accepting it at the August meeting? Would we be okay with that? I don't know. I think we're at a point where that could happen.
I would be okay with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I'll read through it and
Okay.
contact you immediately.
Yeah,
I
get
can't,
us
I
some
didn't
hints.
see anything else. And,
Okay.
Yeah, I don't even need to know that you made this grammatical.
Okay, so we'll move towards a resolution for
We just
August,
need to
and then,
Yeah.
Yeah,
If something
8-5
comes up.
should work, right? I mean, it sounds like we can.
Yeah, we got
Sounds like you folks
2
are
weeks.
able to do it time-wise on your end. and-
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. The next item was a Phase 2 environmental site assessment report for 1200 Empire Boulevard. However, we are going to need to discuss that with council in an attorney-client session after the meeting, so we will move on from there. Next is the New York State Department of State contract for local waterfront revitalization program grant funding. And that's again with Carrie Ivers.
Thank you, Supervisor. So as we've discussed before, the Town of Penfield was successful in a CFA grant submission to get funding to update our local waterfront revitalization program. That's a policy document. It follows it's a policy document that follows New York State DOS, Department of State standards. They have a standard contract that they execute with us, with the town, to award those grant dollars. It's really a boilerplate grant document, and then the only thing that's customized is our work plan, and that work plan is also fairly prescriptive by in order to meet the state's standards. So this would authorize the town supervisor, we need a resolution to authorize the town supervisor to execute the contract. The grant amount was $75,000. That's a 75% match. We anticipated the cost of hiring a consultant to prepare the update would be around that $100,000 mark. It could come in less, and if it does, then the state's grant award would be 75%. If it exceeds that amount, then the state's grant amount is still $75,000, and we make up the balance. And so this is just, we'd like to authorize, obviously the supervisor would need to execute the contract with DOS, and so we wanted just to seek that authorization so we could move forward.
And if this is to be determined, what we're going to use it for?
No, apologies. So the local waterfront revitalization program, it's a planning document or a policy document. And our current one was adopted in 2015.
Okay, I'm back with you.
And although we haven't made any policy change, we're not anticipating significant policy changes,
Right.
the format of the document is no longer conforming with the requirements of the state. Back then, it was adopted, and it was fine to have the 13 policy approach. Now they're saying it's out of compliance. And so they're saying it's in our best interest to update it. And so we would like to, this is a process that has a lot of sort of legal nuance, and we want to hire a consultant who's got specific experience with preparing LWRPs and navigating that process on our behalf.
And this is something we've been talking about
We
for
have.
quite some time, so I'm
Yeah.
back up to speed.
Okay, yes.
Could the result of this be a revision to the the area that's considered? or
So
no?
the map itself cannot change because that's dictated by the coastal, there's a coastal requirement. That map is what the map is. However, the policies and sort of the procedural things within that boundary are something we should revisit.
Because it just, I mean, it comes all the way up to
Yep. And I-
Empire Boulevard or, like in this
Yes.
part that
There are
you don't even know
places
you're
that-
near the bay.
Yeah, so I think what we want to look at is potentially using this as an avenue to revisit the Chapter 232 section for coastal consistency review, and in general, clean up that, right now, the provisions for, what needs what needs waterfront consistency is determined partly in the definitions, which is not a good practice, so we would like to look at maybe updating some things and obviously prioritizing the water for consistency with things that are on or near the waterfront.
All right, so what are you looking for at this point?
I'd be preparing a resolution to authorize you to, authorizing the supervisor to sign and enter into contract with the Department of State for the grant funds. And that would be added to the August legislative session if the town board is supportive.
I would be agreeable to that.
You need a vote?
I don't think you really need a vote because it becomes confusing when you do that
Yeah.
because then it seems like you're approving it twice. So,
Yeah.
so as long as everybody seems to be on board, go ahead and
Resolution.
put that together for the next meeting.
Okay, great.
Thank you. And the final action item is regarding the Penfield Forward project. So again, I will defer to Mark and to Carrie.
We also have Grace with us from Barton LaJudas is zooming in tonight, so.
Hi, Grace.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So we, as you know, Penfield Forward, Tomorrow's Town Spaces has been looking at a wide range of community engagement to understand the future facilities needs and wants from the community. And part of that task is now to look at what, as we're looking at potential projects for the future, what are some of the costs around that? And so Plan Architecture, who is our architectural consultant, had done previous studies as part of other planning activities or space study needs for the town over the course of the last 4 years. I think initially,
2022 from the town hall.
and even maybe 2018 was the library initiated, and then it paused. And so the idea was to update those numbers to today's dollars because, even something from 2025 might now not be current anymore. So Plan Architecture during those previous studies had worked with LaChase to get construction numbers, and so we did receive updated information, so there could be an understanding of what those potential costs might be, and in order for the town board to be able to determine what the next step should be. And so Supervisor Berry, in terms of how do you want to proceed with reviewing the information, do you want to sort of look at the summary table for the costs that we received?
I think that would be a good way to do it.
Okay.
To give a brief overview.
Yeah, so obviously there's a lot of information. LaChase and Plan Architecture provided a very detailed summary of the proposed costs for each of the facilities. There's two things happening. There's a new recreation facility being proposed, and then there's renovation and/or addition being proposed, and a small addition being proposed at the current community center building, and then interior renovation and 2 additions being looked at here for the town hall. In the scenario, the town court facility would be relocated to another location. In this point, to be determined, but it would be likely in a retail or commercial space to provide the town with the most flexibility to navigate any future changes to, the court system here locally. So if at some point the town courts migrate to a quadrant system, the town's in a position to better adapt to that. And so I'll zoom in. I'm sorry?
It's not showing on the screen here.
Oh, I'm so sorry. PCTV, can we take Grace off the screen for now? So sorry, Grace. Thank you. I appreciate that. So just, you'll see here, total project costs and, it's, okay. Can everyone see that? All right. For a project of this scale, if you're looking at these kinds of renovations, the most sort of logical way to proceed would be to look at a future bond project. And so this is what we're seeing. And so the new structure is eligible for a 25-year bond, and then the renovation projects would be subject to a 15-year bond. The town, we did work with our...
Yeah, we worked with the Bernie Donegan group, looking at, what bonding is, and based on the type of structure. So new construction can be bonded for a longer period of time. A renovation would be a shorter period of time. So the numbers you're looking at, one, have been escalated for 2028 construction and beyond. So if, we look to move forward with this, whether the board wants to put that out for a public vote this fall, and then, depending on where the public goes, 2027 would get into design side of things, and then we'd look at, going into 2028 with construction. So the costs you're looking at are 2028 construction costs. These are also included in that is the architectural and engineering design fees are in that, the construction management fees are in that. The
permitting, legal, special inspections, FF&E, which is furniture, fixtures, and equipment.
So
all up, all in.
those are an all
Yes.
up, all in numbers. So we're looking at big numbers, but that's an all in numbers. So as Carrie had said, the recreation would be looking at a new recreation building. We've looked at the campus here in the back before that. So that would be a new building. We've got, conceptual designs for that. So obviously, the numbers are based on that, but we've made sure they're conservative. They've looked at an 8% escalation clause cost into doing that to make sure we are comfortable in incurring that. So if you're asking the public to bond a certain amount of money, you got to make sure, our construction, would be under that. The library would be a full renovation of the entire library buildings. With courts gone, the library could expand into those spaces. If rec was moved out, the library could expand into those spaces. I think the only holdover is the gymnasium space that's used by the Penfield
Players.
and using that space. And then the town hall, as Gary shared, would be an interior renovation. This building is from 1965. So we've got, asbestos tile, under the carpets and the floors. We've got old, lights, old HVAC system. So many of these items, our HVAC system is going to need to be replaced whether this project moves forward or not. Also in these costs, we've embedded looking at using solar and sustainable measures on it, as well as geothermal for these buildings. So, so again, as we're looking at these costs, there's a lot that it's rolled into these numbers that, we'd look to make them sustainable moving forward with that. And then as the board and the supervisor know, the town hall has reached its capacity. This building built in '65, there was like 17,000 residents in town, and we're at 40,000 now. So we're more than double what, the capacity was intended for, and now the staff to support the amount of residents and the staffing support that's needed, we've reached the capacity of this building. So we're looking at some renovations some expansions to, slightly upsize this building, but, of all of these, we're looking for the next 40, 50 years of, support for the community. We're not looking at a 5 to 10 year Band-Aid. We're looking at as the community grows, and that's comes back to the Penfield Forward, Tomorrow's Town Spaces, is looking at where does our community want to go, and that's part of where, Grace is here tonight. She's been doing, great job getting the public's input, getting their, their thoughts on this. We held the meeting last week, and I guess it was a week and a half ago now, and, again, reaching out to the public of what the community wants, and, this is what we've heard thus far, is they'd like the library where it is. They like the walkability of it. They like the location of it. We've looked at a second story. It's not structurally feasible to move to put keep rec there and build and expand the building. So structurally, you'd have to basically take the old building down and start over. We're also constrained on the parking lot, or the area we can expand. The edge of the parking is the town limits of what the property we've owned. We've reached out to the school district. They're not looking to give us or sell us any property on either side, so there's really just no room to grow there. So I know many people have wanted or would love to have the rec stay with the library, but just on the growth and the need, it seems to make the most sense. And the public, thus far, we've heard from is a new rec building somewhere, but people do like the library there, the walkability, the proximity to the school. So that's where staff's kind of gone forward on, is let's get numbers to that. So we've got construction costs from a construction company with escalation costs and everything in that. So these are real numbers to look at of what a new structure would be for the recreation, what a renovation of the full library would be, and then the renovation and some small expansions of the town hall are.
And just for general knowledge, both the recreation and the library leadership have done a lot of work already to listen to the public regarding what the public wants, to look at other facilities, what our options would be, and to really try to create facilities that will be really forward-thinking and very modern and appropriate for a long period of time into the future. So, and I want to commend them for all the work that they did on this, because this has been a long process.
This has been many years of studies
Yeah, it's been many
and
years.
rec master plans and library master plans, so it's not new.
Very, very high-level question with this, with the recreation center going and getting something new, and then a renovation. Can we even renovate until the recreation center is built and moved before we can start truly renovations?
I think it talked about phasing somewhere I saw.
Could look at,
Right.
and that's one of the parts would be to bring a construction manager on very early in the process, but if the courts moved out soonest, that portion
That
could be
portion
renovated
could
of
get
the
started.
courts,
Yeah.
or that could facilitate the town hall offices moving into where the courts are, and, while this building's renovated. So that's, we don't have that all
Understand it would have to be a
quite
phase.
mapped
I
out
just
yet
didn't
on how
know
to
how much of a
phased, and,
waiting there would be.
yeah, we'd have to look at.
I think we were looking at this going into 2031 for completion. Is that correct?
It depends, yeah. So we're looking at, 3 to 4 years, obviously, is everybody here knows the costs aren't getting any cheaper and won't. So, the sooner we can get started and get into construction, the better.
Yep.
So, yeah, so we talked with the bond council, and that's where they started bonding out those time periods and what you legally can, extend those costs off to. I know they provided to us, we've, provided to the board, what that looks like for a typical resident. And we also spoke with the assessor's office of what the average assessment is. So we're not talking for sale costs, because we're talking the assessment of your property is what you get taxed on. So we've, talked to them, so $282,000, I believe, is our average assessed value of a home in Penfield currently. So we've, run some numbers on that to show, what those, costs would break down for the public as well.
And we would want the construction manager to be as strategic as possible in the timing of this, so that we don't pay any more money than we absolutely have to complete the project. So.
Can I ask a question about the, one of the elements of the cost? So on the courts, direct expense, or I guess direct expense.
It's not eligible for bond.
Right, so if that's going to be a lease, though, it'd probably be like a 10-year lease, are we anticipating that we would want to upfront those costs and do the build-out, and then, you know what I mean? Like, normally
So I
it's
think-
built into the lease?
Right, so I think that's one thing. This, and as indicated, that cost does assume that Wick's law and prevailing wage would apply. However, in a leasable space, if the property owner was the one to make the improvements and then we took over the space, I think there's a little bit of a gray area here as to what would apply for us and what wouldn't. So in terms of whether or not we take ownership of the renovation or whether that's done.
Right, well, I guess, what I'm saying is, it's, I don't know if it would be upfront capital cost of anything necessarily,
No,
or
we're just looking at
if
a
you just
whole cost of-
amortize out.
Yes.
what-
Yeah.
So that then, you're talking about bond, so that even though it's a small number in the grand scheme of things, but it's still, over a 10-year lease, it would be spread out.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
not an upfront day one
Right.
cost. That's just, we're just trying to roll up all the costs together so the board understands and the public understands, the magnitude of what these are, but, yeah, that cost is not bondable since it would be under land that we own. It would be, a lease space.
Is any of this, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, do you have the information to show how this would impact the
Yes.
residents? Did you have something that you wanted to
I
ask?
was just going to ask, if there's any state funding would be available for the sustainability, the field service
Obviously, stuff we'd look at, and
Yeah.
of course, stuff we'd
library.
look at, so we're
We're
not.
looking at worst-case scenario, in other words.
We're not
Correct.
counting on that. And then these numbers here from Bernie Denigan's group is looking at a 5.5% bonding rate. Currently, today, it's at 4. So again, we're trying to be very conservative with costs, thinking that by the time you get to bond would be into the 2028, 2029 timeframe. You're into design, and then you start out, you're not going to bond all of the costs until you're into the project, into construction. So again, these are 5.5% rates that, we're looking at as you break down those costs. And in those first 15 years, and Carrie can jump in, those first 15 years are the highest cost, and we'll show you, is because you can only bond the town hall and the library for 15 years. So those are, obviously, the first 15 years would be the most costly. And then as those were paid off after
Here.
15 years, if you go down.
And I'm just going to show you,
show the
this
chart,
shows the
then that
break.
cost drops off, because then you're just paying for the recreation building. And obviously, these can be phased out. We're given the worst-case scenario here of everything went at once.
Right.
Obviously, if you phase it, in any different realm, you'd help spread some of those costs out.
And the bonding would be done in bands, which is similar to what similar to what was done for DPW, where the bonds were,
So it's a bond anticipation note is a band instead of, and then you see where the market's going, where the rate is before you lock in. So today's rate, we're at 4%. This is right on anticipating a 5.5%. Again, just to make sure we're very conservative with numbers and assumptions.
it's always better to estimate higher and then hopefully come in lower.
So to put it in simple terms, what is the average value of a house in Penfield, and what would be the effect on that homeowner?
So
if
right
this
now,
was to go through?
yeah, the average assessment, I believe, is $282,000, which would equate to $513
For the
of
year.
increased cost. So
It's about
divided
40.
by-
So this says full value, but it really, I think, should say assessed value.
Assessed
by
value.
Yes,
these
assessed
charts.
value.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's how the taxes are calculated.
And do we have a number of what percentage, right? Because average is the average, it's not the median. So do we have a thing of, and that represents X percent of households?
We don't, but we can get
Okay.
that.
Because I would really like to know that, how does that apply to our residents? That represents 10% or 50% of our residents. We'll see that $40 a month.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, looking at this, we've talked about, whether or not it makes sense to put this out to the public to vote, and so that if it's something they support it. If it's not something they support, that's a good way for the town to communicate what it's wanting to do. I think the other thing we're looking at is, with Grace's assistance, the next phase would be a community survey that really gets to some information on the numbers and how people feel about these costs. And that's something we can look
Yeah.
at.
So proportionally, like our town tax rate is what, 210? Or if it's 210, some of those numbers were like $1.82, I think. So, and the town tax is the lowest proportion of our property tax. So, it's not even doubling it
Right,
and it would only be for that, the term.
Period
and
of
then it would
time.
drop down after 15 years.
yeah.
So people can estimate what their impact is by looking at the proportion between the 210 versus the 182.
So 400,000, what is that, about $60 a
Oh,
month?
forgive me.
Yeah.
So I should give up my Netflix and my stream. That's not too bad.
I would say, we were saying, and maybe this is just where my head is at, it's like, an order of pizza and wings a month.
Yeah.
And then you'd have a walking track, you could walk it off.
Right,
And
but then we've got people who are on fixed incomes and
Sure.
really, I mean,
But
I joke,
if
but
you
we have to
Yes.
keep
have a
that
gym membership,
top
and now
of
you
mind.
can walk at the, the town rec facility, or you're sending your
Right.
kid out of town to go to a camp, or you're going to other facilities. We heard of that a lot from
Yeah,
other
that's-
people that are going to other places or renting other places because we don't have rooms and spaces available.
I know we've done a lot. We've had many community forums. We had one just recently. We've had surveys. We've opened it up to meetings. But I don't know, is there a better way to reach people, to really get them to understand that this is the future of Penfield? We talk about a town of planned progress, and this is what we're trying to do, but how do we truly get them? How do we communicate with them? Because as much as we have tried, I don't know, I still bump into people that are, what are you talking about, type of thing.
I think
Okay.
that's what we
Is-
can.
Is that part of the reason that Grace is here, is to answer questions such as that?
Yeah, I think in case there are questions about, sort of the community engagement, and there could, the scope of the community engagement effort that we've undertaken to date, the scope is nearly complete, but we could look at expanding that scope to include additional community engagement to really do more, intensive outreach.
Postcards. Every
Yes.
residential household.
Right.
Well,
Please.
we're having things going into the rec brochure.
Rec brochure.
So the rec brochure gets mailed out to everybody, so there's going into the fall rec brochure. We'll have information about this in there. And then the survey that Grace and her group is working on to put that out online. To date, we've not had the costs in there. We've just gotten the cost in, so that's, a lot of people said, we love all of this, but
We need more information.
we need more information. What does it cost? So now we've got some costs in there, and we can, work on sharing that information and then have that survey out there and see where the public's, thoughts are, and then ultimately, if
You got to look at what the lost opportunity cost would be if you don't do it now, then what?
That's key.
DPW is, we keep on using that as an example. I mean, back in 2015, the cost of a new DPW was, 12 million or 15 million. And then when the contract was awarded, was it 26, 25? Or
And
20?
we had, Grace, I don't know, we looked at an annual number, how much this is going up, correct? X
Yes.
number of
we're looking at
millions?
an 8%. 8%
Increase.
escalation is what they're estimating. So every year we
We
wait,
do
it's
nothing.
it's 8% more
Than it was
next
the year
year.
before,
We're
yeah.
not, at least currently, we're not seeing any decrease in that. So if we wait,
And that's about 8 million a year.
Yeah.
it's going to continue to grow and continue to escalate. So,
Yeah,
we know
that's-
these are big numbers. We know it's a lot, but if
That's
this
something
is
that
what we're
Bill
hearing from the
has
public's
said
asking about.
previously, too, that now it's not going to be any less expensive than it is right now. Like,
Right.
this is where, this is the numbers. And to both Peter and Mark, your points, there's a cost in not doing anything. And we're starting to see that. And that's kind of the problem now, too. Like, these costs will go up, and it's very real, and things are going to have to get done. We appreciate all the town employees that are working in cramped conditions and still doing great work. And I think what Linda just said is true, and it's been said by many folks. There's a lot of people who want to see this happen. They do have legitimate concerns about costs. And I think it's just getting that communication down that, hey, if we don't do something, this is going to cost more money in the long run. And let people decide. That's the whole idea of the vote. It's not us coming up with a town board. We're just giving people the opportunity.
And in regard to the vote, if we decide that we do want to move forward, there is a looming deadline that people need to be aware of. Can you explain what that is, Carrie?
Sure. So that in order for an item, a proposition to be on the ballot in November, the town board would have to authorize that, that language and the bond resolution and the language that's going to be added to the ballot submitted to Board of Elections by August 3rd. So resolution would be required in advance of that. So
we would need a special meeting.
A special meeting would need to be called. That's certainly no problem. Special
Right,
meetings get called all the time. And then we did check with if at some point the town board changed its mind, you'd have until September if you wanted to pull it.
Or to change language.
Or change the language, I have to find out, but
Okay.
I can clarify that. But I know
Alright.
for sure it's that they're running up against the early voting and absentee ballot communications.
Okay. Councilmember Lang?
I just want to kind of go through just a thought cloud here for a moment, just to make sure I'm kind of up to speed here. We've got a cornucopia of studies at this point that have indicated each of these facilities are either past their useful life or the community has indicated that they're looking for a significant upgrade. I think that's fair to say at this point. We've got the costs. We've identified the fact that it's never going to be less expensive than it is today, and theoretically, it's going to cost us at least $8 million if we delay it another year. So the costs are never going to be less than what we're looking at here. While the costs are always going to be more than, at least in my mind, I anticipated or would necessarily have thought, it's really as little as we're going to see it be. So any delay is going to cause those numbers to go up. And while I understand the deputy supervisor's point of have we reached everyone, I don't know that we have, and I think that's a fair assessment. The ultimate test really would be to put it to a vote. People would go out whether they like it or they dislike it, and we will have our answer at that point. And I don't know that anything else is truly going to give us a large enough scope of an answer.
Fair, but I would also say that communicating now, this is what's going on, this is what the board is considering, to let them know that we are doing everything to be transparent and to share with them the facts and to make sure they have the location of the website. Doesn't mean everyone will look at the postcard, it doesn't mean everything. I just know that I run into too many people that don't have a clue what I'm talking about when I talk about any of these things. And it's not that they're against it, it's just, I think we owe them every bit of transparency in saying, this is what we've been looking at, this is what we're considering, here's where you can learn more. A simplest postcard that goes out to households.
And the pressing question right now is whether and how to get it on the ballot. After that, that leaves us 3 months to communicate with the public before they really have to make a decision on, by voting. So,
Yeah, I just think being ahead of that and sharing the facts versus letting social media take control or rumors take control or making it look like we're not sharing as much as we can will make it look like a negative versus a long-term benefit to our residents.
It's a long-term investment in the future.
Exactly, agreed.
One of the things we talked about earlier today, and we just came up in conversation, I shared a communication with the supervisor related to this project, and I said maybe a FAQ on the website would be helpful, and I think that could be a good resource on the project page. So there is a project page, obviously, for Penfield Forward to tomorrow's town spaces. Currently on the main page, you'll see and these are concepts only. These concepts were developed just for the purposes of developing cost estimates that were based in some level of reality with square footages and things along those lines and existing conditions for the buildings. So folks have the ability to go online and see them. We're going to be adding new information with more just narrative descriptions of what's here now versus what would be provided in the future, sort of renovations and or new construction. And I think an FAQ could be.
We've had the question, why can't you just add a second story onto the community
Yes.
center and
Right.
go up?
Yeah.
Right.
Why couldn't you just,
Right.
and there's reality-based answers to that. So I think if we can share some of those going, structurally wasn't designed for that. The parking lot is limited,
And
if we
I
can
like
provide
that
many
it's
of
going
those.
in recreation. A lot of people do get that. Everybody gets that, and most people do read it. But again, just making sure, because we can put it on the website, we can put it on social media, but people still don't know what they don't know. And FAQ, all of that data is great, but if they don't know, to go look. So,
Right.
And I think that continues through the fall. If the board decides to put this on a ballot, that'll be in working with Grace and her company, Bartlett Judas, to work through the fall to do as much educating, information sharing, as any means and method as possible to get it out there ahead of that time and make sure
Right.
people know what it's all about and are well aware of it before they go to the polls.
Right, and when I suggest these things, it's not saying, okay, it's not a roadblock to say, and then we're going to wait to do that. No, I just think, as we're looking to see what will it take to get on the ballot, what's the language, all of that, what are we doing to reach?
Well, I think one of the things we can also look at is doing the pop-up events at existing town, we have the Tasting the Blues, we do activities, at the, various, it could be at upcoming, any sporting events, we have a captive audience of hundreds, if not thousands, of Little Leaguers and soccer, and, so these are the, and at the library, if we have pop-up, the people who are there, and so that at least the patrons and the users know it's happening, because we do something right at the library.
Is there anything
Library
we
and rec have
Yeah, they have.
their
a lot.
email list, and they've already blasted that out to their groups ahead of, our event last week, and to share with them. So I know the people that are regular users of rec and the library, that we have their emails, those have been sent out and would
Is there
continue to.
anything that we could ask the school to do from a communication perspective?
I mean, we certainly can. We can even look at the Monroe County water bill for Penfield residents.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
So what are the pressing issues regarding this project for tonight?
I think tonight, if, I don't know if a special meeting can be called at any time. You don't need to act on that at this meeting. We would just know that we would need to schedule one and get that advertised so that public knows it's happening. We would work with bond counsel to get the proper language for the proposition that would be added to the ballot. That would happen in very short order, AKA I'd be emailing people probably tonight to let them know so they have enough time to prepare and coordinate with our town attorney on that as well. My understanding from the Board of Elections is they just need, by August 3rd, submitted via email. There's two folks that we would send it to, and it's just a copy of the resolution authorizing the proposition and the bond vote to be added to the ballot.
So I would want to call a special legislative meeting for next Wednesday regarding this issue, if the board is agreeable to that, because the following week.
It's the following Monday.
Yeah.
So it's short.
It is.
It's 9 days, 9 business days.
Yes.
So call it for that purpose and anything else to come before the board.
Can I ask, I just want to clarify, and I just again, we stay well below our debt limit, right, within the state when it comes to bonds, the amount of bond
And
debt
that's
that
a
we
question
can.
I would ask BPT, but
I know
certainly.
we've had, Brannigan's office and bond counsel involved
We're
in
well
both of those.
underneath
so
that.
And they indicated their availability to participate in a special
good.
meeting.
They said next week he could be there, so Jason from BPD said he'd be available if the board had more technical questions on bonding next week.
Because you don't want Mark or I answering those questions.
Yeah, I didn't know if it had come up or something.
Yes,
I didn't
yes.
see it in anything, but adding it all up, I
Yeah,
know
no one's-
the amount that we have.
No one's raised an issue thus far, and we've
Okay.
looped them into the costs, so bond counsel the bonding group
I think
is.
we're AAA bond rated at this
I
point,
believe
which is
so.
pretty decent.
Yes,
Yeah.
Right.
that's a high rating.
And I don't think this would change that
Well,
based on the
it's
the
that,
debt load,
there's
the
a
total.
New York constitutional limit of how much we could do. And I've got to believe we're well below it even with this.
Yeah,
I would think so.
yeah,
But it would be good to know
Cool. Well,
where we are, how close to the ceiling we are.
big amount versus a little. Yeah.
Yeah, let's please make sure that all the pertinent players are available for that meeting next week.
Yes.
All right. All right, was anything else on that? All right, so next we have some informational items. The first one being with Councilmember Lang regarding Little League.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Supervisor. As you know, or don't necessarily know, I'm the liaison to the Little League. Having also been a parent and a coach and spent a lot of time there, I have frequent interaction with their board. So we've been talking for at least the first few months of the year, talking about several items that they want to do for facility improvements, and it's an ongoing process they do every year. I've also been working with them to create a more long-term, maybe master plan, because right now they kind of function on an as-needed basis, and it's been challenging to predict what kind of investments they actually will need. So I'm hopeful that in the near future we'll have something to share with the board in terms of long-term investments on the property for that. So next year is Penfield Little League's 75th anniversary, if you were not aware, so 75 years of Little League in Penfield. They're doing several special events, and a number of the investments that I'm going to show here are going to be made by Little League to kind of commemorate that. The first of which may not necessarily commemorate the anniversary, but they're looking to do lighting for the batting cages, which are over here on the west lawn where the softball fields are. It doesn't necessarily require any town board action, I don't believe, Mr. Attorney, but it was something they wanted us to weigh in on. This would be lighting that's shown here, and then there's a second image that kind of shows the amount of light that it would provide.
Forgive me. This one right here.
The lights at the batting cages will operate consistently, but they would only be when they're in use. So if there's nobody there, the lights wouldn't remain on. They would never operate past 10 p.m., which is consistent with kind of the lighting regulations in town. And they are doing the investment entirely on their own. So again, I don't know that there's any action needed, or if it's more of a for our information.
Yeah, I think, don't they have there's an agreement or a lease or a license with, so it just have to be incorporated into that document, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's something that we'll maybe
And
bring.
it would be metered and they'd pay the electric, presumably.
I think they would do it based on how they operate the lights down below.
Yeah.
It would just be in addition. The light draw on those is pretty insignificant, being LED. So I don't imagine that would be a huge number. The big investment that they're looking to make is in front of the concession stand, the patio area there. They're looking to put entirely new patio tables, benches, and commemorative brick inlay. They're asking the town to pave the access road which leads to this apron here. So from the parking lot that is along Atlantic Avenue, right along Zabkar Field to the concession stand, they're looking for new pavement, which at this point, that pavement is fairly beyond its operational lifespan, so it does need that investment. They would be providing the tables, the bricks, et cetera, so all that's going to be through their own fundraising, but they were just asking for pavement when we do paving either in the fall or next year. So something to talk about with Parks, I believe, to see if it's in their budget for this year, if it's something we need to look at next year. Part of that project, they would like to include signage, which is along with the kind of flavor of the complex here, with the bricks and the shaping of the signs that are out front. They're looking to have that at the entrance from the parking lot going along that driveway that they're looking to have paved that leads to the concession stand. As the facility is used by, many teams from outside of our area, it would be kind of a nice, welcome to our little area of the world. And it's something we really don't have at this point. So again, investments they're looking to make, just kind of looking for our blessing to utilize the property in order to facilitate the installation of those signs. So it's to the left, Carrie, they're looking,
In this area right here?
no, if you go further left.
forgive me,
That's
over.
okay.
Into the entrance from the main,
That parking lot to your right,
okay.
the paved parking lot, and go straight north from there.
Here, I'll zoom out a little bit so we can see everything.
So see
So
the
this
driveway
area-
along the baseball field to your left there,
Yeah, the sign would be along,
right along the driveway there.
okay, wonderful.
So just a kind of an entrance to the complex, give it some signage that it needs at this point. Again, investments they're looking to make, but didn't know if there needed to be any sort of town board action on that, since it is our property at the end of the day.
Again, we would want to incorporate that in our document, our agreement with the Little League.
Okay. Finally, a couple of long-range projects that they're looking to do would be the potential addition of a third softball field on this west side complex. They've had exponential increase in the softball program. At this point, they've more or less run out of field availability, especially with the younger group that are getting into softball. So it would be placed basically where the cursor is right now. I think, Mark, you guys have kind of mapped it out in the past to show that there is space for it to exist.
Yes, we've done some internal sketches on that and
So-
kind of shown where those, that could lay. It'd probably be a shorter field, so I don't know if it'd be a regulation. I think they had it like as a warm-up area.
Yeah, I think really more for like the really younger kids, like
Yeah,
5 and
either
6-year-old.
younger kids, or I know at times you can go over there and kind of warm up before your team comes on to play. But yeah, it could also be, for younger.
Yeah, so that's something coming down the line. It's not something that's an action item at this point, but just something to keep in the back of your mind is that they will be looking at some point to do that there, and it would be a partnership with the town where they would pay a significant portion of it, and we would have to perform some sort of work in order to make that happen, which has happened in the past with other fields in the complex. And then the last item would be a more big-ticket item that they're working through would be the rebuild of the concession stand to modernize the facility. Bob mentioned it. There was a significant water issue with the restroom facility there over the weekend. Unfortunately, there were a number of games. I fielded a number of complaints from parents that there was no men's room anywhere adjacent to any of those fields, and the significant walk across the west lawn to get to any restroom. So those are, again, beyond their lifespan. That building was never built with the amount of use that it currently has. The kitchen's not really a modern kitchen. They do the best they can with what they have, but it's not really, any money we put into it at this point is just like lighting it on fire, because the building is not being able to keep up with the amount of use, and it never was designed for that. So eventually there will be, an ask for some sort of investment in that facility to modernize it, and probably a full rebuild of it.
So that's not part of the long range, that's more of an immediate?
It's an immediate need, but it's a long-range plan, so
Oh.
there's nothing on paper with dollars and cents associated with it, with what they're actually looking for. It's something we've discussed and started to kind of, plan to see what's real, what's not, what could be fundraised, what would need to be any kind of investment from the town.
I see. Okay.
So just some updates from them at this point. So I'll discuss with them any updates to our agreement to facilitate a couple of those things that they're looking to do. It doesn't require any monetary investment.
Are there any other questions or comments regarding this? Thank you. All right, next we will go on to the fiscal impact analysis and housing market study.
Just a quick update on this project for the town board and the public at large. The town did receive a draft housing market study and fiscal impact analysis document that is just freshly, thanks to Wes, freshly loaded onto the town's website. This is on the project of community interest page. To get there, you'd go on their main page, you go to more, projects of community interest, you'd scroll down till you get to the fiscal impact analysis, and you'll see on the drop down under documents at the very top, today the July 2026 draft plan is available for public review and comment. Certainly we just got it, so I would put this on the agenda for the next month to hopefully discuss it, and if there's any questions we can certainly address those, and if not, we'll move toward deeming the project complete. So some really interesting and information, and it's been packaged in a way that I think is really easy to digest, and that is saying something for a housing market and fiscal impact analysis. So they've done a really great job of making it very user-friendly and really digestible. So, but certainly there's opportunity for comments or feedback, and so please, town board members and the community, if there's questions or clarifications that are needed, we certainly welcome those comments now.
Thank you.
Not now, not tonight, I meant in the coming weeks.
All right, thank you. The next item is a proposal regarding LaSalle's Landing Development District, and this was originally made by Councilmember Lang, so I will ask him to speak to it initially.
Yeah, this was an item we kind of briefly touched on in a previous meeting, and then came up again with Carrie and Mr. Attorney with the brewery application. As we looked at it relative to that application, there's a lot of ambiguity and a gray area, I think is what you mentioned, Carrie, that doesn't necessarily align with other zoning districts in town where there are administrative reviews or, just several nuances that don't exist elsewhere. And the thought was to look at how can we provide clarity, how can we really clear up the ambiguity, and so I'll defer to Carrie on kind of explanation of what she's dove into here.
Yeah, so I appreciate that, and we are certainly on the same page. This has been on my get you list for a long time since I started here at the town. But the language of the code really harkens back to the joint plan that was prepared for LaSalle's Landing between the town of Penfield and the town of Irondequoit. And a lot of the language in there is probably a carryover from that plan document. So it's very superfluous, it's wordier than it needs to be, and it doesn't make the very clear sort of the process and or the requirements or standards for the district. I think there's an opportunity to really clear that up. I don't think the mission or the intent and purpose of the district won't change, but I think the readability and really understanding of what needs town board approval, what can be done or reviewed administratively, what are the requirements and standards for development, new development. Most of this district language reads as if everything's brand new. It doesn't really address things that are existing or redevelopment or changes in occupancy in a real effective way. And so this is one of those occasions where the local law will say Section 1, purpose and intent, Section 2, erase the current 250-5.9 and replace with the following. I think we're looking at a wholesale, not a wholesale change in what's allowed or not allowed or what they're trying to accomplish, but wholesale change in language and making it much cleaner, easier to read. The better, it's easier for everyone. It's easier for the town. It's easier for the property owners. It's easier for developers if they can read a code and understand exactly what they need to do, who they need to talk to get it done. So that's what we're going to be working on. We have a working staff group comprised of Alan, Shannon, Doug Sangster and Matt Prinzing from planning. We've got Mike O'Connor and Amy Owens from engineering. Mark's going to get tagged in. He was only on vacation when we had this meeting, which is why he wasn't there. And so we really do have a very wide range of people at the table for any of these zoning updates. We find it very helpful. The more minds, the merrier when it comes to making sure that we're making things as clear as possible and avoiding unintended consequences. So we'll be working on that, hoping to come to you as soon as possible with some proposed language to review and discuss, and then would be advancing that as a proposed local law through the town board. So no action, just an update. We always like to, anytime there's a zoning code being contemplated, it's always nice to hear about it as an informational item first, when possible.
Any questions or comments at this point? All right, so next we will move on to another town code issue regarding zoning, and again, that was introduced by Councilmember Lang, so I will have him start the conversation.
This is, again, something we mentioned in previous workshop meetings, and it's come up a couple times recently with talking about previous applications, as well as a couple code updates, which are forthcoming. Admittedly, as a zoning and code enforcement person in my real life, I see overlay districts as an admission that there's a problem with the code in it inherently, with the exception of environmental protection overlay districts. That's an entirely different thing altogether. But in this instance, that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at what I interpret to be an admission that there's a deficiency in the code or trying to overlook something in the code. So specific to the four corners of the 250 overlay districts, I would prefer that we take a look at providing some clarity to the underlying zone than creating these overlay districts, which create needless complication. And again, I'll defer to Carrie to kind of talk through what staff are discussing.
Yeah, and I think I'll also maybe tag Mark in here. The 25441 overlays district was at first created as a result of a LUAMP, that's a land use access management plan that was prepared for this area to identify cross-connection access management related opportunities to reduce curb cuts along 250 and 441 in this commercial sort of node of the town. The overlay district was created to provide a mechanism to allow, like, to enforce those requirements, if you will. But it sort of got a little bit murky because it didn't just address access management, it also added land use differences, and now there's a lot of confusion of what applies, what doesn't apply. One of the things that came through the active transportation plan was access management strategy should be employed everywhere we're doing site plan review, on major corridors, commercial redevelopment or new development, cross-access, parking standards, better pedestrian flow, all those things should be addressed in the code universally. And so we're looking at advancing a future draft local law that would eliminate the overlay district for 250, 441. However, it would assemble in a consolidated way access management regulations and standards that could be applied during site plan review or really any approval process that would trigger it. And when we looked at this as a staff, because we did take a preliminary look at this as well in preparation for tonight's meeting, we realized that in chapter, in Article 7, there's provisions in that section that are applied to all districts. And there's multiple separate provisions, 5.3, 5.5, 5.4, like, that address pieces of access management. Like, one deals with access, one deals with shared parking, one deals with, and so we really think there's an opportunity to consolidate and streamline those provisions so that you go to one place to know what your access management needs and requirements are. And so what we would likely do is advance a local law that would, and I'll just bring it up so everybody can sort of see it. It's a little bit easier to understand what we're saying when you're looking at it. So this is provisions applicable to all districts. And you can see we have clear zone vision, that's site distance. We've got access regulation separate. We've got off-street parking, use of parking facilities, traffic and parking control standards, pedestrian access. Those are all things that are really related to access management and best practices for access management and design of ingress, egress, and on-site circulation. So this is a recommendation from the active transportation plan, so we will maybe be setting a groundbreaking record for implementation of an active transportation plan item. But I think it's certainly welcome, and town staff will be working on creating a consolidated access management regulations or standards, and we would likely put that in one place, and then these other ones that are being replaced, those would just be simply removed and it would be referred to as reserved, so that you don't have to mess with the numbering of all the other sections because they're not all in a row. And we don't want to have to renumber, we don't want to have to renumber the, things that are not related, like noise, it doesn't need to be renumbered. So just it's a way to clean this up. Mm-hmm. So we appreciate the call to action. It's something that it aligns very nicely with the active transportation plan, and we're going to be working on that as well. The one thing I would ask, maybe we can wait until the end, but from an order of operation, if there's a preference that the board has of which one to advance first, second, third, certainly please let us know that. And it doesn't have to be decided tonight. It'd be helpful if we know that there's a prioritization.
All right, thank you. And the final informational item tonight is one of particular interest to me, accessory dwelling units. And again, we'll begin with Councilmember Lang.
Thank you, sir. Supervisor Barry and I met with the Housing Coalition here in town earlier this year. They started a conversation with us about the consideration of including accessory dwelling units in the town zoning code. Several reasons that they'd like us to consider this, many of them deriving from the ability to have affordable housing, as well as some generational living arrangement considerations that had really never been envisioned when the zoning code was last written or updated. Obviously, things have changed in the last 5 to 7 years in our country here. So, those things are not foreseen, and now things we're starting to have a conversation about. So this is just the start of the conversation. It should be noted, again, the town's housing study did identify accessory dwelling units as a possible solution or part of the solution to shortage of housing in town. I did include a document in the folder, I believe, that was some of the talking points that the Housing Coalition came forward with. I think there's some really interesting stuff in there that really should shape the conversation. I don't know that it's anything we need to, necessarily discuss tonight, but probably should be something all the board members take a look at, because it is some good information in there, and a lot of, hard work went into that. And then, Carrie and Mark, I don't know if there's stuff you wanted to add as well.
I'll just say that we, again, had a preliminary conversation. I think we've identified sort of areas of issues or opportunities. Certainly, town staff can be doing homework. I'm going to call it homework, but there's a lot of resources, information available through American Planning Association, Urban League, Urban Land Institute. New York State has a +1 ADU program that might lend some information that we can borrow from. And then I think we want to look at other municipalities that have taken on the task of adopting these regulations and learn from them. What would you do differently? As you're applying the code, what lessons are you learning? Because often, as we learn with a lot of brand new code, you don't know what you don't know, as somebody just said earlier in the evening. And so it's nice to not reinvent the wheel and maybe start with something that we think is a good potential model. In addition to American Planning Association, there's the Association of Towns, may have some model language. There's just a lot of information out there. And so I don't know how the town board wants to proceed, if we want to have a conversation about, issues, concerns, and at what point do we want to gauge community feedback, interest, or do we just follow the local law process and develop a draft local law and give people the opportunity to come out and respond to it. But we did as a group review some of the, potential issues, and I think we, just had some initial discussion about the things that we would want to look at in terms of lot size and coverage, and, all the things that ADUs potentially could impact with, off-street parking, the how and where, dealing with stormwater management and things of that nature. So I think we want to make sure that we're, addressing those issues, fully and thoroughly.
I think it would be helpful if the board had the opportunity to take a look at the document that was included, as well as some of the links that Carrie included, and then maybe next workshop we have a discussion about, where we want to go with this. Because it will require a little bit more discussion than just immediately going to the local law route, but I think that's eventually probably the best way to go about it.
Okay. Other thoughts or questions on the ADUs?
Real quick, as a follow-up, I know we've had some discussions about affordable housing community and the opportunities that can provide for state funds, quite frankly. And I guess and if you don't have an answer, I respect it. And thank you all for the work on this, by the way, because it is really important. As Kevin said, it's a really important issue. And as Bill said very well, in the last 5 to 7 years, things have changed. I guess my thought is, have we seen other communities that have been able to implement the ADU and obtain, or does it help in obtaining some of the affordable housing community funds that may be available? Or is it something to check off? And pardon my ignorance on that part, I just want to make sure.
No, I think that's a great question. A couple different answers. One would be, there are probably several communities that anecdotally could give you some insight into how that went for them in terms of that process. I believe, last time I filled out the renewal application, all it looks for is how many housing units have been added in the community. So an accessory dwelling unit would count as a housing unit, as long as it would be a separate living arrangement, which some of these suggestions would allow for. So something to consider, as you mentioned, that doesn't increase the statistical portion of things for the housing community designation.
Thank you.
And I was just doing the housing market study that's out there does
Yes.
briefly address it, but it's definitely addressed in there as well.
And it was also, just as a side, it was also identified in the comprehensive plan as something to look into. So this is moving, again, in the direction of implementation of the comprehensive plan, even just the prospect of looking at it. So,
Other thoughts on ADUs?
can I also share, just in having an anecdotal conversation, this is also a strategy for families who have adult children with disabilities that don't qualify for any other housing opportunities or assistance or really, and so I think that's a need that might be a silent need that we don't hear about publicly, but it was something that got communicated to me, so I'm just sharing it out
That's
loud.
an excellent point.
Yeah, so that if you've got an adult child with disabilities that can't live independently, but doesn't qualify to live in a
group setting.
correct, or, so it really, there's a big gap that potentially could be filled with this approach as well.
And the way we have, right, because we do allow accessory dwelling units, but the problem is, it's in-law. It's
Yes.
very focused, and once you don't have those in-laws and you want to do something else with it.
Right.
So this is exciting. I'm very excited about this.
All right, thank you. So that includes the informational items. There are no held items or old or new business. Was there anything else that anyone wanted to bring up this evening?
I just briefly wanted to mention, it's more of an update. Another one of those kind of side projects I've been working on is somewhat of a passion project with Color Penfield Green. We've been holding home improvement workshops. We've had one the last couple months here, and it's provided residents the opportunity to learn about the plethora of grant opportunities that are available out there to assist with necessary home improvement projects. They've been fairly well attended. Really, the thanks goes out to Al Hibner, who's carried the load on this and organized kind of the seminars and really have been the key to the success of this. I think at this point we've assisted about a dozen homeowners and at least providing them with the information and assisting with applications and getting them through the process. So while the town itself doesn't have a home improvement program, there are a lot of opportunities out there that people just don't know about, and we're looking to kind of establish, is there that demand out there to consider something at the town level? And I think, it's a good first step. We have one more in August, so.
Great, thank you. Anything else this evening? All right, our next work session meeting will be August 19th, and I will move to adjourn by unanimous consent. Does anyone object? Seeing no objections, I will adjourn the meeting at 8:37 PM.